going somewhere.
Oh, we're really hot. Throwing it back a little bit. Hopefully everyone can hear us. This is the start of episode 77. We were determined not to go 2 weeks in a row without streaming.
Absolutely.
We are here to talk about Discovery.
We are indeed 2 episodes of Discovery. We were off the air last week. I was on vacation. Dan, you had a lot going on too.
I'm transfer, so
yeah,
just bear with us.
Yeah,
so
it's been a heck of a couple weeks, but we're here and excited to talk about Point of Light and an O-ball for Sharon. I think is how you pronounce everything. So 2 pretty jam-packed episodes of Discovery. We're going to do our best to cover as much as we can for both. And we're hoping to have some people in the chat to kind of share their thoughts and kind of steer the conversation as per usual. So if you're in the chat, feel free to share your thoughts. Tell us what you thought of both episodes. We're going to start with Point of Light and then move into No Ball for Sharon. And then kind of talk about where Discovery is, I guess, as a whole 4 episodes in. Or would that be like kind of a third of the way through it now?
Yeah.
Sort of.
Sort
of. Before we get started, like we usually do, I know we both had some crazy weeks, but do you have any rewatch updates that you want to kind of share from the last 2 weeks, I guess?
I didn't watch any Trek last week. But I am done with season 6 and moving on to season 7.
Wow. Nice.
So I cruised through that. I'll have to let you guys know, but season 6 maybe my favorite episode or season of TNG. I'll have to review some episodes in 3 and 4. But I'm on to season 7. Gonna be wrapping up TNG here in probably the next month, so I'm excited for that.
Cool. One episode I'm actually kind of curious to ask you about, just because I know your taste and I know the kinds of episodes that you like. Where on the spectrum would you put Second Chances, the 2 Rikers, sort of like if history would have played out differently, Riker Troy stuff? Like, is that a good episode? Is that a weak episode? What do you think?
I liked it. I thought it was kind of a fun kind of sci-fi concept. The only thing is I wish Thomas Riker didn't have the beard, because if you remember when he first came on the Enterprise, he was clean shaven. So I wish they would have kind of had that continuity. But I get it.
Yeah, I think that would have been cool too. I think it would have been a cool touch to have Tom be clean shaven.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting sci-fi concept. Like you said, it's a cool way to kind of explore that, like, road not taken kind of thing. It actually sort of capitalizes on the Riker Troy backstory in a way that the show kind of like dabs their toe in the water with every so often, but never really dives into. Like, this is probably the closest to looking into that dynamic as the show really ever gets, beyond like early season 1 when they talk about it a little bit more. And I know the episodes that delve into romance tend to have an impact for you. They tend to be up your alley, so that's one that I was kind of curious to see if it landed or not.
It's
probably
a solid B if I was to rate it.
I think that's what I would give it to.
Yeah.
Last couple times I've watched it, I think I was in the B territory. Season 6 definitely felt like from a distance that it was landing better than previous seasons. Yeah. Whenever we'd get on here to talk or talk offline about episodes that you were kind of hitting, it felt like you were really, nailing good episode after good episode and really, really liking it. So now that you're done, glad to kind of hear that as a whole, the season kind of holds up. And at the end of it, you can kind of say, I think that might be my favorite season.
Yeah.
So I think that's representative of what you were kind of talking about as you were getting through it.
Yeah.
As opposed to like season 5, where maybe it was a little bit more of a struggle. Maybe not as consistent as season 6 was for you.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree with that.
Cool.
How's your rewatch going?
Not bad. I was on vacation last week, so I went like the week you, I guess, finished season 6. I didn't watch anything this past couple of days when you've been like crazy busy. I watched a few episodes of TOS. I'm into the last. Right? Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. Yeah. It's a really interesting episode. I gave it a B-, which is. I think it is a classic in a lot of ways, because it is sort of, like I said in my little review on Twitter, it's like the poster child for like Star Trek storytelling. It's the classic allegory that whenever like CBS News or CNN or somebody does like a blurb on Star Trek when it hits an anniversary or something, they inevitably show clips from this episode, because it's like, this is Star Trek. This is the kind of stories we tell. This is what Star Trek's all about. And I totally get it's black and white, obviously, pun intended, and it's very kind of on the nose and not necessarily subtle, but that's the point. It's intentionally, I think, like in your face and obvious with what it's talking about, and I get that. My issues with the episode are that I think it's a little on the simple side from a plot standpoint, like it's a little repetitive at times, and the last act is kind of feel like it's a lot of filler. There's like minutes stretches of like characters, the two aliens running through the corridors with like weird images of the planet burning up and stuff. It's doesn't necessarily hold me the entire time. I like the premise more than I like the execution, I guess. Okay. But it's in the upper half of season 3 from where I am right now. So it's good. I think it deserves its status as like that poster child, because it is so in your face, where social commentary, where morality plays. It is like an easy episode to point to and show somebody this is what Star Trek does. But I don't know that I would call it like one of TOS's best.
Yeah. I haven't watched it in a while, so I'll have to definitely revisit that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what you thought.
But it sounds like it's going good.
Yeah, I got like 10 episodes left, so
it sounds like you're wrapping up
close to the end.
TOS, so nice.
Yeah. So I guess we should just dive right into Point of Light.
Yes, we got a lot to cover, so I feel like we should just jump into it.
Yeah, we do. These are pretty jam-packed episodes with a lot going on.
Yep.
So Point of Light is the kind of, I guess because it's 2 weeks ago, is kind of 3 stories. There's a lot of Klingon stuff. There's Burnham and Amanda working through the Spock stuff and the Red Angel stuff, and there's Tilly dealing with this vision of a person that is from her past and not sure what it is. What did you think of Point of Light overall? Which of those 3 stories carried the most weight for you? Like, what are your overall kind of thoughts about that episode?
I think it was a necessary episode to kind of keep the style of storytelling and how the seasons are structured. It's not one-off episodes each week. It's an episodes that's kind of chained together, and I think this is the link between kind of 2 bigger episodes of what's going on. Everything to me is a little bit middle of the road, and I'll kind of dive into that a little bit. But I think the episode was necessary to keep the kind of style they're going for. So
yeah, and it's I agree with everything you said, including that it feels maybe a little bit middle of the road as a whole. But one of the things I appreciated about it is, and it's maybe one of the more controversial things about it that you see people kind of complaining about it online, is that people say it feels like season 1 a little bit. And I kind of like the fact that it's not dropping everything from season 1. Like, I don't want the seasons to be completely like isolated to themselves. And as much as I like the sort of shift in tone that season 2 is offering, I don't necessarily want it to be like a hard reset. I don't want it to feel like a completely new show. And all the Klingon stuff is really what I think has people feeling like, oh, it feels like season 1. I think that's necessary. I think it keeps the show feeling, like one big whole and connected. And you're right, it does kind of keep the plot moving with some more information about what's going on with Spock and kind of setting up where that's going to be going, and the fills you in on what's been happening with Klingons. And obviously, that's a storyline that is going to continue.
Yeah,
on some level, I would assume.
Like talking about like the Cleon stuff, I'm glad they addressed that because I feel like they had to. This great like momentous thing happened in the Empire, and they're not just gonna like brush it under the rug. They're gonna have to come back and revisit it and kind of give like a status update or status quo of what's going on with the Empire. So I think it was necessary for sure.
Yeah, given how much time they dedicated to L'Rell in the first season, like she was as kind of important a character as a lot of the series regulars were. She was really involved, and I think it would be kind of irresponsible, I think, to set all that up and then not pay it off and not let us see what's going on. So I appreciate that they're not totally dropping that storyline. I thought of the three storylines, I don't know if you agree with this, but the Klingon stuff is what worked best for me, actually. I thought the Klingon stuff felt operatic. It felt like Ron Moore, like old school Klingon stuff to some extent. More violent than they could show in Next Generation Deep Space Nine, obviously. Like there's more blood and guts and savagery like on screen as opposed to just kind of talking about it like they did back in the day. But I appreciated like the political backstabbing that was going on and the look at, you know, Klingon upper level politics. I thought it was kind of cool.
Which I think is classic Trek, like you said. Drama between the houses and political positions and stuff like that. It felt Klingon to me for sure.
Yeah, it made me think of episodes like Sins of the Father and Redemption with Gowron and stuff. Like it felt like an extension of that. It didn't feel completely removed. Like it felt like of a piece. It felt like it was all part of one continuity, one line of, you know, history. That all fit for me. I enjoyed that a lot. And that's where the episode I think had the most life. That's where I think I was the most interested as the episode went on. I found myself gravitating more to the Klingon story than some of the other stuff that was happening. What did you think of the reintroduction of Georgiou?
That's what I was just gonna ask you.
Yeah.
To be honest, and like I'll make my claim here. I've never been a fan of Mira Georgiou. He was trying to let that character breathe. I think she's like borderline, you know, mustache twirling villain.
Sometimes, yeah.
And it's frustrating because I love, this might just kind of stem into its own little discussion about Section 31. But the appeal to me about Section 31 is there was always this like moral argument or like inner battle between what's right and what's wrong within not just like the DS9 stuff, but you know, into some Enterprise stuff with Section 31. But the thing is it's tough. I don't know. I'd like to see. I think there's potential there. Like I think, you know, you could see that kind of moral, you know, struggling with morals in that situation. And I don't think Georgiou doesn't have a problem with doing what she's doing. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
Am I way off?
No. I totally hear where you're coming from with Mira Georgiou. That she approaches. I love Michelle Yeoh, so I'm into her as an actress, and I like seeing her. But I think there are times where that character becomes a little simple in terms of the mustache twirling aspect of it, and I think a lot of times the Mirror Universe kind of can
fall into that.
Fall into that trap. So, but she's not in this a whole lot. And I think everything you're kind of talking about with the sort of the appeal of Section 31 is there, and I have a feeling that that's going to develop into the season a good bit. I think we're going to see a good bit of that. And if they execute that battle well, like, you know, the morality of what they're doing, the sort of thing they just did, you know, with it's an interesting thing. Like, it's so antithetical to everything that Starfleet and the Federation stands for. Like, to get involved in these sorts of political squabbles on other planets, and to interfere with like the natural way of things happening on these planets. That, like, that's what we've been told for so long, and then you get to an episode like this where Section 31's involved, and they like stop the assassination of a leader to make sure that, you know, the more the more palatable leader stays in power for the Federation's interests.
Yeah.
That's such a different thing that we're not used to seeing, and I would like to see that, you know, people who are in that universe and people that are in Starfleet and struggle with that, you know, if that comes to light and people deal with that. Deep Space Nine does that a little bit in their Section 31 episodes, and I'd like to see Discovery maybe fight the same battles, but in their own way. So I think there's with the Mirror Universe and with Section 31, I think the thing that both of them have, that because they're so dark and different than what Star Trek typically is, it's always a balancing act. It's always like walking a fine line to make sure that you don't dive too far into cartoony, too dark, too like it's all about the execution. I think there's interesting things to play with there on both those levels, Mirror Universe and Section 31. But I think there's always the fear of going too far. And I'm curious to see where they go with it. I think a lot of people feel the same way, that they're not necessarily anti those things, but are ambivalent about getting too involved with those things and buying into those elements too much. So I'm curious to see where they go with it. Like I said, I like Michelle Yeoh as a whole, but I agree. I hope that they give that character a little bit more nuance as they develop her further and we see more of her. Curious to see what her arc is going to be.
Yeah.
Hopefully she has an arc and she's not just, like you were saying, just enjoying what she's doing and just not having any kind of moral struggle with the Section 31 stuff, and because she's bad, you know, in quotes. Hopefully it's not that simple and there's a little bit more nuance somehow that they can work in there.
Because they can build and write a character that has depth from the Mirror Universe. I mean, look at Lorca. He was from the Mirror Universe, but he had a motive, he had depth, he had, you know, different aspects to his character. I think they can do it. I think they just got to go that direction.
Agreed. Yeah, so I'm anxious to see where they go with it. I'm anxious to see what kind of development they give it. And I think we're going to find out pretty soon. It looks like in the trailer for episode 5 that we're going to see those characters again, and maybe in a little bit more of a way. Like, those characters in Point of Light, they don't come into play until Michelle Yeoh, and then the very, very end, like in the last 10 minutes of the episode. So they're not a big driving force in this episode. It's a reveal late, and they get involved in the Klingon storyline. But we don't know a whole lot about what's going on with that ship. At the end, there's a reveal of the Section 31's flying around in a ship, you know, bouncing around the galaxy, doing the Federation's dirty work, I guess. I guess we're going to find out a little bit more about, you know, how that ship operates and what kind of missions they go on. And I think there's a strong implication when Pike makes that call to that Starfleet starbase captain about the status of Spock, and they find out that, you know, the starbase knows that the medical records have been stolen. We know that from Amanda being on the ship, and the captain says people are on it, looking into it. And I think the strong implication is Section 31's has that on their docket. And that's gonna be what brings them back into the Discovery old Mirror Show and such. So I anticipate a lot more content coming with Section 31, and I think it's all going to be execution is going to be the key. What did you think of the Amanda and Spock and Burnham kind of conversations. There's a lot kind of revealed about, Amanda tried to go visit Spock in this medical facility, this mental health facility, and finds out that Spock's not there, and she has to steal medical records to find out what's going on. And they tap into the medical records, and they find out that Spock's being accused of killing doctors at this place and running off. Nobody really believes it. Pike doesn't believe it. Amanda doesn't believe it. Burnham doesn't believe it. They think there's more to it than that. But it turns into this whole conversation about how Amanda raised both these people, Burnham and Spock, and kind of didn't show empathy to Spock, didn't show emotion to Spock, and gave it all to Burnham. Burnham tells Amanda that she shunned Spock to keep Spock from being too allured by Burnham's humanity, and was fearful of these Vulcan. These Vulcan renegades who tried to kill Burnham. Burnham's trying to protect Spock from like any ties to that whole controversy. So we get a little bit more detail about like their falling out and why they're not involved anymore. Like, how did you feel about those scenes, that aspect of this episode? Was that working for you? Was it good? Yeah,
it's working for me. I think it's just adding more depth and color to the characters and kind of their relationship, and it brings more mystery to Spock and Burnham's relationship. I'm just curious to see, how they're going to interact, how they're going to patch this up. So.
Yeah, I think it's like you said at the very beginning. It's a necessary episode. Like in all these things, it's kind of setting up. It's an early season episode. It's kind of teeing up story threads that are going to be paid off down the road. Clearly, I thought the Amanda scene with Burnham, where they're kind of talking about these things, their history, was one of the highlights of the episode. Like that scene worked for me a good bit. Burnham talking about why she pushed Spock away, and Amanda talking about the difference in raising the human and the half Vulcan, half human, and this conversation about like empathy and who has it and who doesn't. Like that worked. That felt like Star Trek to me, and thought that was a scene that gave the episode some life and kept it moving. And I think it's going to set up a lot of things coming down the road.
Yeah.
So. One of the things, real quick, that people I see kind of complaining about it as a whole, this episode and kind of the season, is they feel kind of, and it's just the product of not being able to binge a show, is kind of being left hanging with the Spock mystery and feeling like, come on, let's just get to it. Does it bother you? Do you feel like you're kind of being strung along? Are you okay with like the structural nature of kind of half introducing this character and having a lot of conversation about this person who's off screen? Do you have an issue with the way they're kind of building this? No.
I appreciate it because I think it adds to the mystery. I think in a day and age where we have everything now and right now, like you said, we get to binge these big stories. I kind of appreciate it. I think it's fun to have this mystery and wondering throughout the week, like, how is this going to go, and speculating, and I think it's really fun. And something that I don't get from a lot of other shows and past Trek, because you can binge it and you've seen it a million times. So I appreciate it. I don't have an issue with it.
Me neither. I don't have any complaints about it at all. Yeah. I say at the end of every episode, man, if this was all available, I would, if this all dropped at one time like Netflix shows do, I'd take a weekend off and watch it all in like a day. And I know I would do that. I know myself well enough to like know that I'm not disciplined enough to like stretch it out. But I'm glad that I have to stretch it out. I'm glad that I have to let the episodes breathe a little bit. I have time to think about it. There's time to talk about it and speculate. I think that's half the fun of it. I think everybody kind of putting their head down for 14 hours in a row and just banging it out and not looking back, and then having no like ability to separate the episodes and give the episodes room to breathe. I think that would be one way of doing it, but it's not my preferred way for Trek. I like the experience of being able to take it slow with Star Trek and kind of letting it breathe a little bit. So I don't have a problem with it. I'm like you said, I'm glad that there's like this mystery element to it, because Star Trek has always been so episodic, even when it wasn't. Like even when like Deep Space Nine was an Enterprise, we're getting into like serialized storytelling. There was never really much of like an element of mystery, like unanswered questions. Maybe a little bit with like the Xindi stuff, like what's going on there, but not nearly to this extent. Yeah. yeah, they toyed with it a little bit, but this is easily the most that Trek has kind of done this kind of thing where you're getting pulled along and you're piecing, a larger thing together like the characters are. And it's got this weird dynamic because it's about a character that we know about and we know how it sort of has to end up, but the details and how we get there are all open-ended, and
Yep.
I'm not sure how it's all going to fall into place. Like it's got a weird texture to it, and I kind of appreciate it, and I'm glad that it's not all just handed to us at one time.
Yep.
So, yeah. The thing that I think is going to be the most maybe weird to talk about as because we're talking about 2 episodes here is the Tilly May thing, and because we kind of know what happens in episode 4. Like it's certainly not a storyline that's done yet. From like there's going to be more to it in episode 5 and maybe even beyond. Who knows? But episode 3 ends at a point where there's a lot of unanswered questions, and then episode 4 answers a lot of those questions. Yeah. So should we talk about that like more broadly as a part of episode 4, or just talk about like that storyline as a whole? Like what do we think of the May Tilly thing? Or
I'd say probably more broadly.
Yeah.
I think that again, like typical Discovery fashion, it's a cool sci-fi concept. There's a lot of mystery there. You're like, why is this
happening?
Happening. And I think there is a draw to the next episode. And I think that's a strong kind of strategy to build a show around. Is you're always drawn to the next one and the next one and the next one, which I think, again, we talked about kind of mystery and talking about episodes breathe, but I think that helps rewatchability down the road.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about the Tilly May thing more as a part of the episode 4 conversation, I guess, like broadly and how like where it is up to this point. So episode 3 as a whole, you said it's kind of middle of the road. Like, how do you kind of feel about it overall? Like
overall, definitely middle of the road. Probably C+ to B-. I think these kind of 3 different storylines throughout the episode are necessary. Like I said, nothing really jumped out at me. There were some things that I had issues with, like the Giorgio thing in Section 31. What brings it up for me and what keeps it strong is the Cleon stuff. You guys know that I love the Cleon culture and how the dynamic works with the like the political side of it, and then you throw a kid in there, and then it's just all over the place. So
yeah, we didn't even really touch on that. Like, how did you feel about the kid? Like the fact that L'Rell obviously there was a lot of discussion about this. Like, when did that all happen? And I think the answer to that is at the end of the Butcher's Knife, where L'Rell like tells Voke when he's still Voke, you're gonna have to sacrifice everything. We're gonna take you back to House Mackay, and stuff's gonna happen.
Yep.
And then the next episode, they're on the prison ship, and Tyler is there. But I think there was always kind of I'd have to go back and watch it again, but there was always kind of an implication that it was always implied that there was some passage of time there between those 2 episodes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking watching the episode.
Yeah. So they go back to House Mackay, and romance kind of comes to the surface a little bit more as they're getting ready to do this thing, and Klingon baby happens. And they talk about this. They I guess L'Rell had the fetus removed from her and like developed extra fetusly or whatever the term was that she used, because she didn't want to deal with it while she was going through this, political stuff through the war, and that she kept it a secret. Like, how did that work for you? Like, I know we talked about the Klingon stuff kind of working more broadly and feeling of a piece with 90s Trek, but the Tyler Voke, like this whole dynamic of L'Rell Tyler, L'Rell Voke, like
it's
how do you feel about it?
Definitely interesting to me. I like it. I just don't know where the kid I don't know what that was trying to achieve. Like I'm sure we'll revisit that, but I don't know.
I'm curious to see if we do, because they send it off to this monastery, and who knows if we'll ever see that thing again, Like,
I don't know why it was so wish-wash, like A-B, like it's here, then it's not. So I'm not sure why that was kind of an issue, unless it was just like kind of a one-off to try to, I don't know. It's like, all right, how do we try to get her killed? Okay, she can have a baby. Like, yeah,
it makes her weak. Yeah.
How do we make her vulnerable and to the rest of the Empire? So I don't know.
Yeah, I think the issue with this episode is I think because it's trying to do a lot, like it's trying to lay the groundwork for a lot of things. A lot of the things sort of maybe feel a little half baked.
Yeah.
There's there's a lot on the surface there, but I don't know that everything's necessarily really well developed. The episode's clearly trying to be about motherhood. You know, there's so much talk about Amanda and her raising of these two people, and Laurel having this baby, and she says, you know, don't call me Chancellor anymore, call me Mother at the end, like I'm the mother of the Empire. But clearly motherhood is it's like the big theme of this episode. It's like clearly when the writer sat down to write it, he said, oh, the theme of this episode is going to be motherhood. So I don't know. It didn't feel to me like this is always the challenge with Discovery, because we don't know what's coming. Like the context of more information later might more develop this episode and make it feel better, or lack of more context might drop it down a little bit. If like we never go back to anything more with this child, and you know, that might force me to drop it down a little bit on my scale. So there's a lot of open-ended stuff that we're not sure about yet. And that's what this episode feels like. It's kind of like the tee-up episode, where there's not a lot of payoff for the things that are offered up in this episode. Specifically, it's all going to be dependent on what's coming. And yeah, like you said, it's kind of like the necessary bridge, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had just watched Rightful Heir, so it was like, Cleon Monastery.
Yeah, that planet. Same planet.
Yeah.
Yep. So which is cool. There's a lot of cool. Yeah. This episode has a lot of cool continuity Klingon kind of stuff. You know, I like the fact that Laurel's biggest rival is Cole's father, played by Kenneth Mitchell. I like that. I liked that Point of Light story is something like the title Point of Light. Like that's all tied into like old Klingon mythology with Ron Moore. Like they dive into all that stuff. It's all kind of there. I really like and appreciate that they did that. There was a lot of effort to, like I said, make the Klingon stuff feel all of a piece. Did you like the new look of the Klingons? Like the Laurel hair and Klingons growing?
I liked it. I think I don't know, you know, what the reason behind it is. They felt pressure to kind of go back to the classical look, or it's not wartime, so they're not shaving their heads and stuff like that. So I think it works fine.
Yeah, I don't know. It's fine with me. If they didn't change it, I would have been like, whatever. These are the Klingons. In Discovery, I had already kind of grown accustomed to it.
Yeah.
By the end of, I mean, I was accepting of it pretty early on. But it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other to me. It doesn't really matter.
Just how do we cut down on makeup times? All right, let's put some hair on there. Like,
So I was cool with all that. I did have one other thing I wanted to ask about this episode, and it just left my head. This is the problem with live. It's the only downside to live. You're on the spot. But there was something else, and if I think of it, we'll.
Yeah, I loved. I also loved Section 31's ship.
Very cool.
The rotating nacelles, very Voyager-esque, and I thought that was awesome.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely a cool starship design.
Yeah.
And I suspect we'll be seeing a lot more of that ship, which is cool. Cool. I will. I'll, if it pops into my head later, I'll remember and ask you about it. But let's move into.
Yeah, what do you think of episode 4?
I loved episode 4. I'm still. It's kind of like New Eden in a sense that my initial reaction to it was like on such a high. I tweeted something like, "Could this have been my favorite episode of Star Trek in 20 years?" Yeah. And I was like, and I don't know. I'm definitely guilty of like newness syndrome. Yeah. Especially when Discovery does episodes like this that feel like classic Trek in a lot of ways. It's easy to like latch onto thoughts like that. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I did love it. I loved it a lot. I thought it was. I've talked about this before. I think like the formula for a truly great Star Trek episode, like the best Star Trek episodes, when they can have like that cool science fiction backbone for the premise, like there's a real science fiction premise to it. When there is like real character development, real depth to it, to exploring a character or a set of characters, and there's an emotional punch, there's some humor. Like if it can have all of those things, they're the classics. And when I watch this episode, I feel like it checks all of those boxes, which is why I felt such a high coming off that episode. I thought the Saru stuff was really well done. I think Doug Jones is incredible. And I thought the science fiction story of this entity that isn't looking for first contact, it's looking for last contact, it's kind of like a classic Star Trek conceit. Like you get stopped by this thing, you think it's a threat, but the more information you can gather and the more open-minded you are to understanding what it is, you kind of come to figure out that it's not the threat you think it is. To me, that's Star Trek. That's what it's all about. It's coming to an understanding and not just blowing things out of the sky because, they're an inconvenience. So I thought the humor between Stamets and Reno, it worked for me. I see it's a little bit more divisive online. See if it worked for you or not. But it worked for you? Yeah. Cool. So like every angle of it worked as far as I was concerned. The sphere and Saru and Burnham, their dynamic, trying to figure out what's going on. The stuff in the engineering bay with Tilly and Reno and Stamets worked. I had a hard time finding things that didn't land for me. So that's my overall. I loved it. What about you?
I loved it. Where do I begin? It felt, like you said, classic. Everything's broke. We got to fix it. Kind of Trek. But it also was like had that devil in the dark angle with kind of like exploring like this isn't a threat, like you said. It's it's trying to communicate with us. We got to see like a boardroom meeting. It's in overall just the way each storyline went. Like I never found myself like, if we went to engineering, like I was like, okay, like just got to get through this to get back to A or B or something like this. I was like, oh, I want to see what's going on here. Oh, I want to see what's going on here. Like, it was just a really great episode.
Yeah, I feel the same way. That's a good way to put it. With, not feeling like you're being dragged out of one story into another. No. Sometimes if there's an imbalance with the A and B story working or not, it can sometimes feel like that. Like, please don't take me away from this. I don't really care about that.
Yeah.
This didn't feel that way at all. I feel like wherever the episode took me, I was satisfied.
Yes.
I was happy to be there.
Yep.
I thought the boardroom, seeing Burnham at the head of the table and, crewmen that you don't normally see, like Reese, the tactical officer, sitting there giving input, and Linus is there, like just seeing the different crewmen, like senior officers, in a ready room or a observation lounge kind of setting, talking about what's going on. There's something just Star Trek about that, and we didn't get a lot of that in season 1 because Lorca wasn't interested in having such meetings. He didn't care about that, but on this ship now with this crew and operating in a more conventional way, we're getting that. I think that's great. So little things like that, little scenes like that are tucked away, really worked for me. It's similar to New Eden in the sense that it has that like classic Star Trek feel. Like it's a kind of a one-off. It feels very episodic, while still being tied to this larger story. The pull is still there to find Spock. Like they're talking about the Red Angel at the beginning, but the issue that takes up a large part of the episode, the A plot at least, is very independent and is something that we haven't seen before and we may not see again in future episodes, which I think the season's done a pretty good job of. I think all 4 of these episodes feel, like their own thing. And like I've said that in season 1, that That's something I was kind of hoping for, and I think it achieved it, especially in the first half of the season. But I think this season's really kind of killing that. Each episode is, unmistakably its own entity. This is as different from Point of Light as, Point of Light is from Brother. Like, they're all completely their own thing. You can't mistake. These are episodes that you can identify by like a log line, like a one sentence. Like, this is the one where this happens, and it's clear and easy to pinpoint individual episodes, which I think is one of the reasons I love Star Trek. It has that Swiss Army knife we always talk about. But yeah, did the Saru character development, like, they do some big things with his character in this episode. He thinks he's going to die. It ties into the short trek from a couple months ago. They talk about this biological process that's telling him he's got to sacrifice himself for the great balance, I think he calls it. And if you don't sacrifice yourself, this medical thing that he has going on drives you insane and kills you. But it turns out at the end of the episode that they don't need to sacrifice themselves. Like, it kind of ends on its own. The threat ganglia fall out on their own, and he's better now than he was before. He doesn't have this fear all the time. The threat ganglia aren't like keeping him on edge. That's a pretty big like character shift in theory. Like, that's going to be something that hopefully he has to reckon with. Like, it's a big change. What did you think about them kind of taking that route? I think it was really well done. I think they used they springboarded off the short track, like you said.
It's gonna be a whole new character almost, and like almost a whole new species, because maybe he liberates the species. He down the road he comes down there and
convinces them that they don't have to be doing this.
Yeah, it's definitely almost like a 180 as far as directional goes for this character. I'm excited to kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, definitely agree. I'm excited to see where it goes, and it really does kind of like redefine the whole. The way you would explain a Kelpian was that they're prey. They operate out of fear in every way. That's what makes Saru so heroic, is that he's afraid all the time. He has to constantly fight that insecurity and those instincts. And it's a pretty gutsy, ballsy move to redefine Saru individually, and then potentially the Kelpians as a whole, like species, pointed out. Yeah, in such a grand way. Like, that's not something you usually get. I remember hearing, like, in Star Trek, on the Star Trek Generations DVD commentary, they talk about the motion chip for Data being like this fundamental change that they were always afraid to do mid-show, but they felt like, we could do that in a movie. Like, for a motion picture, we can give a character like that hard right turn and kind of redefine the possibilities for what this character can be. But when they were on the show, they were always afraid to do it. They felt like, bad idea to redefine a character to that fundamental level. And this show is not afraid to do that. We don't know how that's going to manifest itself in Saru's development, his story arc moving forward, how on the forefront it's going to be. I would imagine they pretty well telegraphed that it's going to be, something that he's going to be dealing with moving forward. So I think it's going to be a big deal. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you can go.
Did the emotional scenes between Burnham and Saru, where they're talking about their relationship and Saru's background, like, did that work for you? Did it feel heavy-handed? Did it feel like it was well pitched? Was it emotional? Was it not? Like, how did you feel about those scenes?
It definitely felt strong. I think that from like the end of season 1, beginning of season 2, it always felt like this family dynamic, like brother sister type of thing. So it felt, and I was kind of right there with Burnham. I kind of got lost in this episode. I was like, are they actually gonna kill Saru? Is this the end? Like, I was genuinely worried. So I think it worked for me.
It worked for me too. It definitely brought back memories when he's, this is a Star Trek issue because there's just so much Star Trek. There's always like something that it reminds you of from the past. An episode that you watched fairly recently was Ethics in season 5.
Bring that up.
Yeah, when Worf's trying to get Riker to help him commit suicide, basically. Yeah. Very reminiscent of that. This leans more heavily into like the emotional component of that. Riker pretty much quickly says, screw you, I'm not doing this. Yeah. Like leaves the knife sitting there and walks away. Where this Burnham was going to do it, which is kind of a big thing too. Like she was struggling, but she had the knife right there. I think she was going to do it.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what that says about Burnham. Like depending on how you kind of view the issue and you come down on it, that might bother people about Burnham. I don't know, or it might. I don't know. It's just that's a big moment for Burnham too. That I think maybe isn't getting talked about as much as like just the overwhelming change that Saru is clearly going through. But Burnham was going to respect his wishes and do it, which is pretty big. Yeah. The overall Sphere plot, like, did you like the kind of conceit that this thing was trying to make last contact and it was trying to just communicate and share its knowledge and make sure that it wasn't forgotten? Like, was that cool? Was it not? Like, how did you feel about that A plot, I guess?
Yeah, again,
from the sci-fi element of it.
Again, it was cool. It was a cool sci-fi concept. I think that us as Star Trek fans and us as Star Trek, not us, but they always kind of focus on first contact.
Yeah.
And not a lot of times it's last contact. And like I said, it definitely had kind of the devil in the dark vibe, in that I thought this was like a bad entity that was hurting the ship.
Yeah,
but it was easy. Really, which is cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really nice. Like it's different enough, but still like in the spirit of what Trek does.
Yeah,
where it really had me feeling good. It felt right that this entity would try to do that. And I saw somebody post on Twitter that they think that like it makes perfect sense that the way Starfleet kind of knows about things like these ancient civilizations that kind of get talked about, like early in TNG, that episode, the Takan Empire, and the Iconians. Like, how do they know about things that have been gone for forever? Well, maybe they got the information from this thing.
Yeah.
Like there's cool like retcon, opportunities that come from getting information like this that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool. And I don't know. I appreciated like. I did the tone of this episode just kind of worked for me. Like this kind of, I think it was tricky in that it goes for some really heavy, like emotional, like sad kind of vibes. And it's easy to like potentially go too far on that and become pretentious and like over heavy and heavy handed. And, that storyline with the Sphere, like it has this tinge of like, kind of like sadness kind of, once you know what it is and you go back and watch it again, you know what the thing's doing. It kind of hovers over the whole episode, and I think it does a good job of managing that tone and putting you in that headspace throughout. That there's this kind of heavy thing happening. This ancient giant thing is getting ready to go, and it's just trying to make sure that it's not, never known. Like it's trying to make sure that it's completely forgotten. And there's something kind of sad about it. Kind of profound when it works. Like I love my favorite moment in the episode, and to me, like when it was happening and when it ended, I was like, that's like an all Star Trek moment, is after they succeed and the ship gets pushed away and Saru has Burnham like take him to his quarters and Pike stands up and the whole crew stands up and looks at him. Like that to me was like, man, that feels like Trek. That's like an emotional thing. Like these guys know what he just did. Like not only did he like make last contact with this thing, they know that he's not well, like he's fighting through all these things. Like the respect of that moment, and Pike kind of starts it by being the first to stand, is definitely a great moment that really worked for me. I think that's maybe the moment where I started thinking along the lines of, is this the best episode in 20 years? I don't know. Yeah. That might be the thing that like jolted me in that direction.
Yeah, and I think that yeah, that scene like gave me goosebumps because it was like I realized that this crew is so connected.
Yeah.
Season one, they felt like a crew, but they felt very professional and very. I don't know. They were good at what they do, but there wasn't that deeper connection.
Yeah. The family vibe wasn't there.
Yeah, and now this was, yeah, it was emotional and just that little. It's just crazy how just that little, 15 to 30-second scene, is so powerful.
It is, yeah. And I think one of the things that the composer does that I've noticed is like there are these little moments that like as the turbo lift doors close and like Saru's watching the crew, like sees the crew standing up, showing the respect. There's this little tinge of like the classic Star Trek theme. It's almost like the composer's like telegraphing like Star Trek, like, it's becoming more and more like the classic Trek that like the family aspect of the crew is coming together. The all these things that like tie all these shows together and make them one thing are starting to manifest themselves on this ship and on this show. And I've noticed that he does that, Jeff Russo, and gave me goosebumps too. Like it made me feel good. Like that's what I felt at the end of this episode. It had me feeling good in a way that Star Trek, when it's at its best, does. Like it ends and you're like, I feel better about life. And like, it's not a good Star Trek is usually it's smart people doing heroic things and that's what this episode is.
Yes.
And that it never sways from that kind of mission. Yeah. But good.
What did you think of the Stamets and Tilly and that kind of thing? What happened in engineering?
All that stuff, which kind of ties into the Tilly May storyline, I guess, more broadly too. I loved every minute of them in engineering. I think Reno works. I think she reminds me of. I saw somebody. I can't take credit for. Might have been Chris Jones actually from Trek FM. Gave legend, podcasting legend. He said that Reno reminds him of like McCoy, just as an engineer. I mean, maybe a little bit more extreme, a little bit more modern, but is very like off the cuff and casual and says what's on her mind. And I kind of get that. I agree. I think it's refreshing. She talks like a real person. And I thought the scene, the first like introduction between Stamets and Reno, where they're talking about warp drive and the mycelial spore drive, like that was great. That was really good. That's like classic Star Trek humor when it works. It reminded me of like a Spock and McCoy debate. That was funny and genuinely so, and didn't feel stagey or cute. Like it felt like these two people talking about their life's work, and how they kind of clash and why one's better than the other. That was really good. And that's kind of like what sets off, I guess, this whole storyline with them together. And as a whole, it worked for me. I thought it, like we said at the beginning of this episode conversation, I never felt like I was being dragged away from the A plot and into this aspect of the episode. This felt as rewarding as the Saru sphere stuff did. What about you? You kind of telegraphed early that it worked for you.
Yeah,
but
I really liked it. I thought it was fun to see the dynamic between Reno and Stamets. I think they complement each other well.
They do.
I think that Reno is kind of the product of the time as an engineer. Like a TNG engineer and a TOS era engineer are very different, and I tend to like the TOS engineer is because I don't know, just the way they kind of operate and kind of handle situations, I think is fun. I just loved their kind of dynamic and back and forth, kind of trying to solve this big kind of high sci-fi concept that ties back to season 1. Obviously with the little green spore, but it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I agree with you too that the TOS here are definitely the type that seem like they get their hands dirty more.
Yep.
The duct tape solutions, like when you think of yep. when you think of like Geordi and B'Elanna, you don't necessarily think of them like getting their hands dirty as much as they are just like more IT guys, you know.
Yes.
More IT people, like really good on a computer and solving issues that way. Where Scotty and Reno, Trip, going back even further, feel like they're
rolling up the sleeves,
getting greasy, and
yeah.
Fixing the inner workings of the ship in like a more physical way. And I like that. Reno feels very much in line with, and by that, the nature of that kind of job, she's more down to earth, and like maybe a little bit more cynical, and Stamets was too. He's a curmudgeon too at heart.
Yeah.
He's kind of eased up a little bit through his friendship with Tilly, and the whole development of his character has like led to him loosening. But early on, he was not a friendly guy when we first met him. So it makes sense that these characters would kind of clash, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how their relationship develops as the show goes on. But yeah, I loved every minute of that. I even thought like the way they dealt with the Tilly thing and the creature was just like classic Star Trek.
Yeah.
That just felt like a story you could get in like 90s in Deep Space Nine or Voyager. Like the way that they solved the problem, the way that they didn't really solve it at the end of the day, but they thought they solved it up to a point. Felt Trek. I don't think old school Trek would have had a drill bit be the solution. They probably would have figured out some other way to do it. Very cringeworthy moment. Yeah, that's rough. But
I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah, that's pretty rough. Yeah. Just the first time they met, me, I'm very skeevy. Like I look away from football injuries. Like I can't deal with that stuff. I'm not good with blood. I'm not good with that anything in that realm. So the minute they kind of telegraphed they're using a real, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't watch this. Yeah. But I love the way they did it. I love the Bowie song. I thought that was cool. Like that didn't bother me. Did it bother you? Were you good with that? Like,
no, I was like, oh, this sweet moment, and then he raises up the bell. I'm like, oh no, here we go.
That's why he's doing this. Yeah. Yep. So everything about that story worked, and it's clearly to me telegraphing the path that we're going to go down that kind of makes sure that this spore drive never sees the light of day again. They're pretty apparently doing some damage to the whole network by using it, and there's societies and alien species, at least one that we're dealing with here, that are a part of that. So and that's the kind of thing that's going to be necessary to sell that they're not able to use this. The Voyager using this was not an option to get home. Even going down that road, I think they're going down a road that's going to make that a feasible explanation, which I think is a big part of why a lot of people are ambivalent towards Discovery. Like just the very notion of the spore drive and how can they explain this thing away? Why are they even going down this road? Like people are afraid, I think, that if they can't explain it well enough, it's going to damage the greater whole. Like it's going to make other shows. I don't know. It's going to damage continuity. But I think if a storyline like this is executed well enough, it. And in fact, I was thinking a lot about Equinox, and if Starfleet captains like Janeway knows about the Omega molecule, so maybe Janeway knows about this spore drive. Like she knows that this thing happened 100 years ago, and the fact that Ransom is using what he's using to get home is like in Janeway's mind, if it all works out this way, like maybe half the reason she's so angry is like we dealt with this 100 years ago, something that this is an issue that we dealt with and decided we weren't going to do. So it almost, if it's done a certain way, I think it could almost make Equinox even more, powerful, I guess,
again,
or
Discovery,
contextual.
Discovery adding to the greater Trek universes.
Absolutely.
I'm curious though, are they going to do a refit though if they go away from the spore drive? Because the whole ship design is almost centered around using the spore drive. I mean, the saucer section will turn, and so I'm just curious if maybe we'll
possibly
see a refit or something. Yeah,
it's certainly possible. Because you're right. Yeah, this ship, it's pretty obviously explained in Context is for Kings. This ship and the Glen were kind of built as prototypes to play with this technology.
Yeah.
It's a science ship. That's kind of the reason they have this test bay that they're always in engineering. They always say, behind the scenes people, I guess, say that that's technically not like engineering proper. That's a
Yeah, they
that's
didn't
a lab.
say
That's,
main engineering. It's always engineering.
No, it's an engineering lab. Yeah, it's a test bay alpha. I think Lorca calls it at the beginning. In Context is for Kings. That this is a specific lab to work on the spore drive, and main engineering is off somewhere else. So this ship is built to mainly do this. So you're right. Yeah, what's the ship's purpose without it? And in Calypso, the ship is hidden away someplace.
Exactly.
Obviously I think at this point we kind of know that you can pretty well discern that that's why they have to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
It's never, it's not going to be found. Maybe because they can't. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah,
I'm sure we're going to find out. I'm sure something down the road will telegraph why or how they're going to reckon with this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was feeling good about that too as we were going down that road, because I too am anxious to see, like, what are they going to do with the sport? Like, how are they going to make this make sense in the greater scheme of things? And when they started down that road in this episode, I felt good about it. I felt like, okay, this kind of explanation is going to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad it's this, because that's got the potential for a Star Trek story too. Like Starfleet, of course, would not continue to use something that's doing damage somewhere else. That's an opportunity to do a very Star Trek thing, and kind of say we'll sacrifice using this technology that could do us a lot of good because it's hurting somebody else.
Yeah.
So yeah. How do you feel about the Tilly May thing as a whole? Like just the character dynamics between Tilly and May. May's in Point of Light obviously a lot more than she is in this episode. We really don't see her much in Oval for Sharon.
Yeah.
But as like a kind of a 2-part story, or maybe a 3-part story moving forward, how are you feeling about this? Like, that's what the Green Spore was. It's this alien that's manifesting itself in the memory of a person that Tilly wants to kind of try to make this happen.
Yeah, I think it works. I think it's cool. It obviously uses again, I keep coming back to this sci-fi concept. That's really cool. I think that exploring the mycelial network a little bit more is fascinating to me, and I'm interested about it, and I'm curious to kind of see where it goes. It is a little bit unsettling, just the alien and how it attaches itself, and
it is.
And yeah, so I thought it worked. It was really good overall from the 2-part episode, not 2-part, but the 2 episodes together. I think worked really well. Yeah,
I agree. I think I echo that it is kind of seeing the thing like crawl up her arm, like envelop her, and ultimately end up becoming like this giant cocoon thing laying on the ground, and she's in there somewhere. It's pretty creepy stuff. I think that's cool. Yeah, I think that whole storyline worked pretty well. One other kind of thing, going back to the main plot that I didn't ask about, that when the Universal Translator goes offline,
so fun. Yeah,
I thought that was really good. Yeah. That because I really didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what kind of direction it was going in. When that started happening, I was like blown away for some reason. I don't know. I was like, what are they doing? Like, is this going to be the episode? They can't communicate with each other. It just felt fresh and different. And Star Trek's done similar kind of things in the past, here and there. There's an episode early in Deep Space Nine where they all speak gibberish and stuff, but they get a virus that makes them not able to communicate. But it almost fooled me into thinking, man, is this the episode is just going to be this? But it was cool. It was funny. There was some funny stuff in it. It surprised me when she started speaking Klingon. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And yeah, it was cute and it was funny, and I think it lasted just long enough. I liked Saru getting the explanation from Burnham, and Saru saying, "I have eyes and ears, Burnham." Like, I get it. Like, I thought it was good.
Fun satire.
Yeah. the humor landed in this episode. That's what I mean. Like, the emotion worked, the humor worked, the science fiction concept felt good and felt Star Trek. Didn't just feel like it felt like uniquely Trek. And I think the Saru character stuff landed, and they did big things with the character and really developed him. So I think it's a classic. We'll see how it ages and see how time away from it kind of brings it down to earth. But I'm pretty darn happy with it.
I know you posted on Twitter, but where does it rank? Early rankings.
Early rankings for season 2. I did post on Twitter, and I was going to ask you too for this very thing. I think it's the best episode of the season. I think this and New Eden are close for me. I think that's the conversation. But I think you good?
Keep going. Yeah.
Yep. I think this one and New Eden are close, and they're similar in that episodic kind of nature. But I am I'm leaning towards this one just because I think it does a little bit more, and I think it's a little bit more ambitious than New Eden is. And then I have Brother 3 and Point of Light 4. What about you?
I'll even make a bolder claim. This is, I think, the best episode of the series.
Okay.
So,
I would agree. I think I agree with you.
Yeah, I think you mentioned everything that you mentioned. Yeah, it's just, I think it takes the cake. Into the Force They Go is up there for me too. Context of Kings, obviously, but yeah, I think this jumps to the top for me.
I think what this episode has that episodes like They maybe don't have, Context is for Kings maybe a little more so than Into the Forest I Go, is this one is going to be really rewatchable because it is so episodic.
Yep.
This one's going to be an easy one to throw in, and you got to kill an hour and you want to watch an episode of Star randomly. This is a good one to do that because it stands on its own for a large part of it. It ends a little bit on a cliffhanger with the Tilly stuff, but the story's pretty well contained, and it's satisfying at the end of it. Where Into the Forest I Go is very much kind of like a middle of the season, like big bridge that bridges the first half of the season to the second half, and it's paying off on a lot of things that the whole season had built up to. Context of Kings is maybe a little bit more episodic than Into the Forest I Go, but is also very kind of tied into what's going on with Burnham and everything. This feels like a classic one-off Star Trek episode that I think is going to make it really, really fare well on rewatches. That don't necessarily call for you to, binge the whole show to get the full enjoyment out of it. So, yeah, I would feel pretty comfortable saying that it's my favorite episode of the series right now. But again, I am consciously guilty of being, prone to newness syndrome.
Yeah,
and
same here.
Thinking the last thing is the greatest. So,
yeah.
So we'll see.
Yep.
But where did the other episodes rank for you? Like what's 2, 3, 4 if this is number 1?
Man, I have such.
Be honest.
I have such a hard time with New Eden, and I know it ranks high with a lot of people, including you.
It does. Be you. Don't hedge. Just
I would probably put Brother above New Eden.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I would.
When I posted it on Twitter, there were people who responded, and like, it's not, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. I mean, we
that compromise at the end. Yeah. Is New Eden better than Point of Light?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Cool. Who's the MVP of the season so far?
MVP of the season. It's tough. I don't know. It's got to be Pike right now. Early Pike.
Yeah.
I just think he came in so fast and so strong that like he almost hit the ground running as a character goes. Like it takes a few episodes, I feel like, for the for the actor to feel like the character and feel comfortable in it. From the
Not him, though.
very beginning, he just felt comfortable. He felt Pike, and
yeah. True that. I agree with that.
But we will. We'll see when the Trekkie Awards come out, I guess.
Yeah. True enough. Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
That will happen at some point.
Yep.
The reason that question was interesting because like these last 2 episodes, Pike I think has been a little bit more in the background, and like I certainly loved Pike a lot in Brother New Eden, even more so Brother, maybe just because he's so like at the center of that.
Yeah.
But the last episode I think is so all over the place. It might be hard to pin who the MVP is. You could say Mary Chieffo. You might say Shazad Latif. I don't know. And then in this episode, I think it's Doug Jones for sure. In recent memory, for me, it might not be Pike, but as a whole, Pike's got great moments in this one too.
Yeah.
But he's so heavy in the first 2.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. Probably start wrapping it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Cool. Do you have any Star Trek content you maybe recommend, or maybe
just the standard?
I don't know.
Yeah, on top of the standard million Discovery recaps that are out there that are all great in their own way. I did guest on Delta Flyer and talked about Resolutions. The Janeway Chakotay stranded on a planet.
Great episode.
Kind of, sort of love story, not really, but could have been. Really good episode, really meaty episode, a lot to talk about. That was a lot of fun, and I would definitely encourage everybody to head on over to Delta Flyer and check that episode. Check out their backlog. They're a good show. They do a good job talking about Voyager. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, that's what I'll probably kind of piggyback onto Delta Flyer. Definitely check it out. Thad's a good guy, and they have some really great discussions. So definitely head on over to Delta Flyer. I think we do have to mention Trek Ranks. I feel like every episode we do. Another great episode there. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tease and just say I have a guest spot coming up. I'm not going to say what it is because I haven't been announced publicly yet, and I don't want to step on toes. But I'll be on another show soon that I'll be really excited to talk about.
Nice.
Really looking forward to doing that. Actually, this week, recording that. It should be out hopefully by the weekend. So be on the lookout.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right. That has been episode 77, I believe, of Trek Live. We'll be back next weekend with more Discovery content covering the latest episode. The podcast will probably be a little bit late. I'm still going through finalizing the transfer up here in the new spot, so may take me a little bit of time to get that out. That being said, the discussion does not have to stop here. Come over to Twitter. I'm going to be jumping back into the rewatch, obviously. So we'll be talking about that, Season 7. Bill's going through TOS, so I think it's a good kind of balance of whatever you're looking for.
Yeah.
Come over to the Discord if you want to kind of have a deeper discussion. And then our Facebook. So, yeah. It's been fun catching up on Discovery. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. Thanks for watching or listening.